Hey now, today we are finally going to take a look at Pandemic, specifically the second edition of Pandemic from designer Matt Leacock and publisher Z-Man Games. Now, I'm kind of ashamed to say that I haven't actually reviewed Pandemic yet. I mean, it is, by all accounts, one of the most popular modern designer board games, or just board games in general, ever at this point. I mean, it hasn't really hit mass market status like Monopoly or Scrabble, but I kind of see that in its future. That's how popular it is. Most lists on the internet that rank people's, like the actual fans' choice for the top games of all time puts Pandemic either at the top or close to it. It was on Will Wheaton's tabletop, and that just made its popularity explode even more. And it has been in my collection since the time that I got into the hobby. So that's spoiling what my final thoughts on the game are probably going to be. But for those of you that aren't in the know as to what Pandemic is, I'm sure there's a few of you out there, the theme of the game is that there are these 4 viral outbreaks around the globe. And you and the other players are first responders and scientists and technicians who are trying to jet set around the world and take care of these outbreaks and cure all of these deadly diseases before they eradicate mankind. So this is a pure cooperative game. It is one of the games that the cooperative games that sort of started the whole trend. I mean, there were other ones before, but this is really the game that started the whole cooperative craze a couple of years ago, which has only slightly died down since then. So without further ado, let's take a brief look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. The goal of Pandemic is to cure all 4 diseases that are spreading wildly throughout the world. At the bottom of the board, you have these little markers representing potential cures for the 4 diseases in the respective colors. Every time that you cure one of them, you'll move them up. As soon as all 4 of them are cured, you win the game. Now, you can also eradicate them, which will flip these bottles over to their just say no sign, but you don't need to do that to win the game. It doesn't matter how many cubes are on the board, the cubes representing the diseases. It doesn't matter how many of those cubes are on the board, as long as you've cured the 4 diseases, you will win right away. But even though there's one way to win, there's 3 ways to lose. Periodically, there are going to be outbreaks across the world. When that happens, you're going to have to move the outbreak track up 1 each time. If there ever gets to be 8 outbreaks and you go to the skull and crossbones, you immediately lose the game. There is also a possibility that you'll have to put more disease cubes out on the board of a particular color, and if there are no more disease cubes of that color when you need to put more out, you will immediately lose the game. That disease has become too powerful and too widespread. Also, if the deck of player cards represented here ever runs out, and another player has to draw cards and there are not enough available for him to draw, you will immediately lose the game. Time has run out and humanity is doomed. But let's focus on the positive and talk about what the characters can do. So at the beginning, each player is going to get one of these random roll cards, which represents different types of first responders, and you'll get a different special ability depending on which role that you get. So for instance, you might be the operations expert who can more easily build research stations without having to discard a card, and can move from a research station to any city by discarding any city card. And this will make more sense as I explain the game. The scientist only needs 4 cards of the same color to cure a disease. The quarantine specialist prevents more disease cubes from coming out on the board. And the medic can very easily remove disease cards on the board, whereas it's pretty difficult for all the other players. So you'll get your roll card, and you're going to place yourself in your player pawns in Atlanta together with one of these research stations. And that's because in Atlanta is the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. Then each player is going to get 2 cards from the player deck, and then you're going to have a little bit of setup to do, because you have to set up the player deck in a very special way. The reason for that is that there's actually 3 different types of cards in that deck. The more plentiful cards are these city cards. There's more than one card for every city on the map, and they're all in different colors. And these are going to be used for 2 primary things. One of them is travel. You can discard these cards in order to travel to certain cities, and I'll explain more about that later. And also, you're going to need to turn in a set of 5 of these, or 4 for the scientists, at a research station in order to cure the diseases. So you're going to be constantly trying to get these cards and swap them between the different players in order to cure that. There's also going to be event cards, which are the other beneficial card in this deck. These are one-time use cards that do not require an action and can be used at any time, even on another player's turn, and they give you some special benefits. So for instance, the government grant, lets you immediately build a research station in any city without having to discard a card or spend an action. The airlift immediately moves one pawn to any city. And just the last example I'll give, the resilient population, you can remove any one card in the infection discard pile from the game, and that's a very good thing. Now, there is one last type of card that will be in the player deck, and it is the one bad card, but there will be multiples of them, and that is the epidemic card. This is not good in any way, shape, or form. This represents the game working against you, and in fact, you're going to decide what your difficulty level is ahead of time, and you'll have that many cards in there depending. So if you're doing an introductory game, you'll have 4 epidemic cards. If you're doing a standard game, it'll be 5. If you're doing a heroic game, a really difficult one, there'll be 6 cards. And so after everyone gets their 2 cards, you're actually going to split the player deck up into even piles depending on the number of epidemic cards, shuffle an epidemic card into each of those stacks, and then put one on top of the other. And so that means that you're not sure when the epidemic cards are going to show up, but they're somewhat evenly spaced throughout. And what an epidemic card is going to force you to do is first move the infection rate track up. We'll get back to that in a moment. Then you're going to infect. You're going to draw the bottom card from the infection deck, and each card in the infection deck represents a different city. At the beginning of the game, I draw cards just to determine what the initial starting disease cubes are. So you'll draw step 2 here. You'll draw that bottom card and put 3 cubes in that city. Then you have to take every card that's in the discard pile, including the cards that start off there at the beginning of the game, shuffle them up and put them on top of the infect deck. That means that now you'll be drawing the same cards that you just put disease cubes out for, and that can be a very bad thing. So epidemics are bad cards to draw, but you're going to have to do it eventually. Now, let's talk more about how infections work and all of that. Now, your player turn is going to be, we'll get back to that in a minute. Let's just go through a typical play turn. So you'll decide who's going to go first, and then on your turn, the first thing you do, and it's described down here in a handy-dandy way, is 4 actions. Now, you have only 4 actions to do, each player, but you actually have 8 different things that you can possibly use those actions for. A lot of them are just movement. So every time that you move your pawn from one line to another connected cities, that's called a drive or ferry action, in which case you simply move. That's all it is. It costs you one of your 4 actions. You can also just take a direct flight. You're going to have to discard a city card in order to move to a city of the appropriate name. So if I did this, I'd move to Madrid, which is right here. Just by discarding that card, that takes an action. You can also discard a city card that matches the city that you happen to be in. So let's say I had the Madrid card when I'm in Madrid in order to charter a flight, and in which case I can move to any city that I want regardless of which card I discarded. And the last thing you can do is do a shuttle flight. Now, if you have more than one research station on the board and you happen to be in one of those spots where there's a research station, you can use an action to what I call magically teleport to another spot that has a research station. So those are the movement actions. Now, the first of the let's say actions, I guess, is to actually build one of those research stations. In order to do that, you're going to need to discard a city card that matches that city. So in order to build a research station in Karachi here, I'd have to actually discard the Karachi card. I'd be able to build one of those here, but there's only 6 of them in the supply. But research stations are where you need to go in order to cure diseases, which I'll get back to in a second. The other thing you can do on your turn is treat disease. If you're in a spot that actually has disease cubes on the board, you can spend an action for every disease cube there to remove it from the board and put it back in the stock. This is a good way, but somewhat inefficient way to keep the diseases under control, and you're going to need to do it in order to keep outbreaks from occurring. The other thing you can do is share knowledge, which is essentially swapping cards. You're either going to have to, no matter what, your pawns are going to have to be in the same spot. And you can only give a card that matches the city that you're in with that player. So if you're both in Khartoum, one player can give the Khartoum card to the other player, or if it's their turn and they want to get it from that player, they can use their action to take it from them. But you always have to be in the same city, and there's some special roles that'll let you get around that. So it's a little bit inefficient, but you may have to do it. The last thing you can do with your actions is discover a cure. You have to be at a research station, and you have to discard a set of 5 cards, unless you're the scientist, of the same color of the disease that you're trying to cure. You discard those cards immediately, move that cure token up, and from that point forward, whenever you use the treat disease option to remove cubes, you actually, of that color that's been cured, you remove every cube of that color from that city. And if you manage to wipe out all of the different cubes of that color, the disease is eradicated and can no longer be put on the board. But even if you have it cured, until that point when it's eradicated, you can still put more of those cubes of that color out onto the board. Now, once you do your 4 actions, you're going to draw 2 cards from the player deck. And remember that this could possibly end the game if you haven't been managing your time very efficiently. You can only have 7 cards in hand. So at this point, if you have more than 7, you're going to have to discard down. And then you're going to get to the bad part of your turn. Every player has to do a bad thing at the end of their turn, which is called Infect Cities. Wherever the infection rate is, this little tracker here, you have a number. It's 2 for the first 3, then 3 for the next 2, and 4 for the next 2, which is really bad if it gets to that point. You're going to draw that many cards from the Infect deck, and whatever cards come up, you're going to have to infect those cities with 1 cube. So here we have Bangkok. Here we have Madrid. Hey, I was just there. And then we have Delhi. And you'll find the spot on the board, put the appropriate colored card out, and that'll be it. Now, here's the bad thing. When you're infecting cities, it's possible that an outbreak will occur. Let's say that an epidemic card had been drawn, and the Ho Chi Minh City card, we'll just say for the sake of argument I did it, let's say that a Ho Chi Minh City card gets drawn again, and there's already 3 cubes there. If there's already 3 cubes in a spot and another cube has to go there, you don't put a 4th cube there. Instead, an outbreak occurs. You move the outbreak marker up, and then every city connected to that city where the outbreak occurred gets a cube of the appropriate color, which is bad in and of itself, but it could also set off a chain reaction. Let's say that there was already 3 cubes here in Bangkok when Ho Chi Minh City busted loose. Then another outbreak occurs, which means you have to move that up again and more cubes spread out. The only upside here is that it can never go back again. So you can't have Bangkok have an outbreak, then go back and have Ho Chi Minh City outbreak again. You always just essentially keep moving forward with the disease and spreading outwards instead of back inwards. So that is one way that the game can definitely escalate and have more and more bad things happen. Once you get done infecting cities, then it goes to the next player's turn, and you do it all over again. Take your 4 actions, draw your cards, hope you don't get an epidemic too soon. It's possible to have back-to-back epidemics, and discard if you have to, and then go back to infecting cities. And that's really it. You're using your actions together with the other players as efficiently as possible, trying to give advice to each other, trying to all win together. One last thing I should mention is that really you're not supposed to show the other players your cards during the game that you have from the player deck, but you can freely give advice. You can kind of say what you have, and if you want to have an easier game, you can just play with all of your cards face up. That is entirely up to you. That is essentially Pandemic. Well, I don't think that any discussion of Pandemic can start without touching on the theme of the game. Now, I mentioned in the beginning of the video that Pandemic was one of the sterling examples of a cooperative game, one that really ushered in the whole movement, and a lot of people also talk about its theme in the same way. Now, it's just like being this awesome thing that a lot of other games try to emulate. Now, I don't actually think the Pandemic is one of the most thematic games ever when it comes down to the gameplay, because at a certain point, you are just cube crunching. You're trying to, you're putting out cubes and removing cubes, and sometimes it can feel just slightly abstract in that regard. But on the bigger picture side of things, I really do enjoy the theme and what it represents. It's funny because we just played this game recently after quite a while, after this whole Ebola thing has spread around the country, and around the world. Now, I think that in this country, it's not as serious a problem as some in the media would lead you to believe, although it is a very serious problem in other parts of the world. So in that kind of environment, it's very interesting to play this game. And sure enough, many comments about Ebola were said during our recent playings of the game. And so because of that, and because of it's a theme that, even though I would say that it's, purely speculative fiction on one hand, on the other hand, because it's not purely science fiction or, fantasy, a lot more people can relate to it. I mean, it's kind of scary in a way, and it's, a little bit chilling, but and if you think about it too much, if you think about all these cubes representing millions and millions of people dying, that's a little sobering. But on the other hand, it is based in real world science in a way. So In that regard, the theme is a rousing success with this, and just having people be able to understand it. It's not some far-off mystical realm. It's a dark version of our world, which is a little more relatable, as grim as that might be. So I think it knocks out of the park in that regard. Now, as far as the components, this is the second edition of the game that I reviewed. I actually had the original edition very, very briefly unfortunately, before the new one came out. But I think everything looks really good here. I actually like the art style of the new edition. Some people don't. I thought the first one looked like my first chemistry set, as other people have said. But I like the artwork of the characters and the roll cards, the box. The map looks a little bit too dark, and some of the text is a little hard to read, especially for the connecting lines from Asia to North America and to South America, but it's not that big a deal. I think everything looks well. I like the pieces, the little wooden bits. It definitely it sort of crosses that or bridges that gap between looking like a pure Euro game but having some like really nice thematic, almost Ameritrash elements. I think that blend works really well there. So let's talk about the gameplay. There's a reason why this game is so highly regarded, and it's because it's a great gateway game. And that's not to say that this is a very simple game. But the beauty of it is that you can make it as simple or as difficult as you want. And when I say simple and difficult, I'm talking about the actual difficulty of the game. I don't think that a game needs to be, as far as the rules, needs to be needlessly complex in order for it to be a good game. I've never thought that. In this game, you can teach to, it's gonna, if you're actually teaching this to people who are new, which is fine, I think this game is really good for that, then it is going to take you a little bit, especially the cooperative aspect of it. You'd be surprised how many people kind of struggle with that, even if they played cooperative video games. For a board game where you're supposed to be like bloodthirsty, cutthroat, going after each other, it can be a hard concept to wrap your head around actually working together. But once you get through that, and once you get through how the game actually works, it's really a breeze, and it's very simple, and that's to its benefit. But like I said, even though it's cooperative, even though you're working together against the game, which can be very, very brutal. Even on the introductory setting, until you actually have a firm footing of what you're trying to do and what you have to accomplish and how to hold cards and who to give cards to and how to be incredibly efficient about your actions, you will lose that introductory setting. Now, eventually you're going to get to the point where you're breezing through introductory, and then you go to standard and it's just that one extra epidemic card, just like, wow. And sometimes, because this is all based on random card draw and random card shuffles from two different decks, you're just going to have bad, unlucky games of this. It's just going to happen. You're going to have those rare moments where you draw an epidemic and within a few more cards, you draw another epidemic and things just go really, really south really fast. It's just going to happen, unfortunately. But having said that, there's still a lot of skill involved in this game, and it's a skill that's brought out by teamwork. You have to work together. That's another reason why this game is held up as such a benchmark for a cooperative gameplay. Now, the downside to this, and this is the big criticism about this game that everyone always throws around, is that it is very susceptible to the alpha gamer syndrome, where one person who really knows the game well, or thinks that they know the game well, tells the other players what to do, for better or for worse. It's interesting, too, because the more I play this and the more I play other cooperative games that sort of suffer from the same problem, I not only can see that happening more and more, but I see people doing it, including myself, who don't necessarily mean to. It's just an easy thing to do. You're all working together. You think that you see the best move out there on the board. And when you see someone doing something that seems suboptimal, you can't help but want to correct them. When in reality, what you should be doing is giving advice. And so I've really, really tried to do that as much as I can, not just in Pandemic, but in other games. But I think in Pandemic, it's really helpful, especially if you're playing with new people who you want to be as non-confrontational as possible. You want to ease them into it. And you see them doing something like you see them going and spending one of their actions to move instead of like clearing a cube that they should be clearing on the way in order to prevent an outbreak. And at that point, you don't say, whoa, do this, this, and this. You say, we really have to keep these diseases under control. It might be a good idea to remove cubes as best you can. And if they catch on to that and they do it, that's great. If not, then you might pay the price, but at least they've learned something, hopefully. And Pandemic is not a very long game. I think your first game might take you a little bit longer than it should, maybe 60 to 90 minutes, but the box says 45 minutes. And I can definitely see that. Once you know what you're doing, even with 4 players, you can really click through it pretty fast. And unfortunately, the game can end very quickly if things just go from bad to worse. I love, even the most dreadful thing about the game, as far as the difficulty, is also one of the coolest things about it. How the outbreaks work, how things can just seem fine. You go through the initial setup and you've got a bunch of cubes of all these diseases out on the board, and it's like, yeah, okay, it's not too bad. Then, you add some more cubes, and you're like, oh, this isn't too bad. Then you draw that epidemic, and you shuffle all those cards back up and put them on top, and it's like, oh, wait a minute. Now we're going to draw those same cards again? Okay. And then things just spiral out of control. And there's just, it can easily go to having 2 or 3 outbreaks all at once. And you're like, ah! And all of a sudden, you were having a great time just coasting through this, and now you're on the razor's edge. And that's not going to be for everyone, but this is not as tense an experience as some other, really brutally difficult cooperative games like Ghost Stories or even Yggdrasil to a degree. Pandemic really, it really feels a little bit lighter than those games while still having some depth, and it feels like even if you fail, it's not that bad. The game is not that long. You can easily start up again, and the adjustable difficulty really helps. Once you think you have the game figured out, and trust me, if you've only played it a few times, you don't have the game figured out, then you can easily amp up the difficulty. So I love all the different roles that you have, which really give you some character and give you a distinct ability that no one else has, so you don't all feel the same. It really helps keep the abstractness of the game at bay and lets you feel special, like you can actually do something that no one else can. So I really, really like that. And it's just a great game. It doesn't really excite me so much as other cooperative games I have, like Robinson Crusoe or even Ghost Stories, because I just like those themes better. And they're just because as I've gone on and played more and more games, I want something a little bit meatier and a little more difficult. But still, this Pandemic is one of those games that it might sound cliche at this point, but it is a fantastic gateway game. It's got a great theme, and if you just want a quick cooperative experience that is still pretty difficult, you really can't go wrong. And it really lives up to the hype in that regard. So if you haven't tried it yet, and I do believe there's a few of you out there that have not, you owe it to yourself to give it a shot.